What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of The Ascent. Today's episode is very special because it features the very first guest on our show. And today's guest is none other than Will Reid. Now, before I let you dive into our hour-long conversation, I just wanted to give you a brief introduction of who Will is. Will worked as a faculty member at my high school, Northfield Mount Hermon, a boarding school in Western Massachusetts, where he taught a wide variety of classes, mostly in the math department. He taught me Precalculus and he taught Drake Calculus. He also briefly coached the baseball team and later joined the varsity track team. And it was actually on the varsity track team where he had the opportunity to work with Drake outside the classroom. In 2019, he left my school and joined an insurance company called Cigna as an actuary, and that is where he is currently working. Now, that's a little bit about Will, and you're going to get to know him a little more as you tune in throughout the episode. Now, before I let you go, one last thing. Throughout the recording session, Drake experienced a great deal of technical difficulties regarding his internet connection, so he will only be present for the first 10-15 minutes or so of the episode. And that is actually also the reason behind the disconnect in the middle of the episode. But don't worry, I continue to chat with Will, and we talked about a lot of super fascinating topics that you won't be disappointed by. Alright, I'm done talking. That's all I got for you. I hope you enjoy this episode of The Ascent.
What's good? My name is Drake. Ron, introduce yourself.
What's going on, everybody? It's Ronald Wang, and welcome to The Ascent. Today, it's an honor to have Will Reid, one of our past teachers, mentors, Drake's past track coach, to join us here on the podcast. How are you doing, Will?
I'm great. Yeah, just having a nice evening in my house here. How are you guys doing?
Good. It's I'm in Hong Kong, so it's actually 8 o'clock in the morning over here.
Oh, jeez. Getting up early for me.
It is, yeah. Well, we're just gonna dive into some basic information about you because nobody really we don't really know much about you in the past 2 years since you left NMH. We would love to hear what you're up to now. So before we get to that, how about you give us a little information about yourself, like what your background is, what your upbringing is, where you're from, just anything you're willing to share about yourself.
Yeah, wow. Where to begin? So I'm from Massachusetts originally, Western Massachusetts. So actually I grew up about 10 minutes away from where both of you gentlemen went to high school. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, just had a regular, middle-class American life, I guess, growing up in Western Mass. And both of my parents taught in independent schools, private schools. And so that kind of, I guess, exposed me to that world. And I ended up going to one for high school. It was a school down the road from where you guys went.
Deerfield.
And
Deerfield.
Yes. Yep, yeah. That's the name of the school. And yeah, I mean, it gave me like a really interesting, I don't know, just kind of like exposure to, like a culture that I don't think I would have seen otherwise, just like being a Western Mass kid or whatever, because people were from all over the place, and it like expanded the socioeconomic band that I was exposed to. And yeah, so did that. I mean, I always kind of liked math. But I didn't really like school very much. I think I was just a defiant child, so maybe that was why. But yeah, so did that. Suffered through high school. Went to college. I think as like a act of protest, ended up studying music, which probably wasn't a good decision. Minored in math and did that, and I did track and cross country. So yeah, did that and. Yeah, I went to school at Hamilton College, New York State, right in the center of the state, small liberal arts school. Did that, had an awesome time, really cool music program there and everything. And yeah, enjoyed it. And then afterwards, wasn't really sure what to do. Ended up getting a job as a teacher, taught like music and math for a year, and realized that math teaching, there was a lot more like employment opportunities than music teaching. So I stuck with math, and I did that for a few years, I guess 9 years, and coached too, as you guys know. And then, the last couple of years, I just kind of wanted to change, wanted to spend a little more time with my family and stuff. So I ended up doing a career change, and now I work for a massive corporation. It's called Cigna. It's a health insurance company, and I'm a health actuary. So I'm doing that now. It's kind of like, the mathematicians who like do all the healthcare premiums, in broad strokes. So yeah, I'm doing that now. I've been doing it for a couple of years. I'm part of like a program where you kind of are learning. I'm an actuarial student right now. So kind of learning about the business. And I'm actually about to rotate to a new role in just a couple of weeks. So anyway, I don't know if that was what you had in mind in terms of time. Probably rambled for 3 minutes there, but that's me, and that's where I'm at now.
No, it's all good.
Will, where's Cigna at? Is Cigna in Hartford?
It is, yeah. Although it's like many of these companies, right? It's like super big, so there's offices all over. I'm near the Hartford office, so I'm in Simsbury, Connecticut right now is the town. It's like west of Hartford. But yeah, so that's the office I go into. But there's also one in Austin. There's one in Nashville. There's an office in Philly. There's an office in New York. And then, all these like mergers happening. Now there's one in New Jersey. I think there's one in the Midwest somewhere. I don't even know. So offices all over the place. But yes, Hartford is like HQ.
Gotcha. I did not know that you studied music in college. I think you told me that you struggled in our pre-calc class. You told me that you struggled in math kind of in high school. But like kind of what music did you study in college more specifically? Because I mean, math and music is like very different things. Creative, logical. It's very interesting. Like, what type of music did you study in college?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. I mean, I've heard that. Like, I think a lot of people's perspective is that like music and math are like maybe different sides of the brain, to use like maybe an antiquated expression. But yeah, no, for me, they're like very similar. Like, math is like trying to describe things with patterns, and music is just like patterns that sound really good and make you feel a certain way. And so, yeah, to me, they were like totally connected. And I think that like my study of music kind of, I think, reflected that, opinion about it or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, I always liked singing. So I was like a singer. I did, a cappella and all that stuff, choir, barbershop, chamber singer.
Footage.
Wait, you did a cappella? Yeah. How did we not know that?
I did, yes.
No. Yeah. Will one time in calc class showed us the footage. It was incredible. Well, he had a solo, and I think you had like long hair. No, it was awesome.
Yeah, the college fro,
you did a cappella at Hamilton.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I majored in music. I mean, the way it works there is it's like a small department. There's probably only like, 3 or 4 music majors in every year. So I was one of them. It's kind of a weird decision to do. And it's mostly like you study Western music, right? So it's a lot of like music history of like Europe, and you study that, you study theory, right? Which I found really appealing because it's kind of like the math of music. Like, what are the patterns? I don't know if either of you guys have taken theory, but
got scared off.
Yeah. Yeah. It starts, you learn about scales and then like chords and kind of how it all pieces together and how like what the Western music, like way of describing, like notes and rhythms and all that stuff. So yeah, I did that. But I mean, what I really loved doing was arranging music. So I did like a lot of arranging for a cappella. So like I was the guy with the pitch pipe, writing the music and stuff like that. So that was really fun. I think that's maybe definitely one of my favorite things I did in college. And then, like Hamilton actually has an electronic studio. I mean, I heard the nice little, like intro music. I don't know if one of you guys put that together or if you just ripped it off the internet somewhere.
Ripped it right off.
Right off the internet.
Yeah. But yeah, so Logic was the software that we were using, and it was part of the reason why I wanted to go to Hamilton. I, in my mind in high school, thought that like maybe I wanted to do that. like make computer music, like production. And I knew there was a studio there, so that was one of the draws. And so my senior project is like I just made a CD of like music. I don't think anyone would really want to listen to it, but I had a really nice time. Like it was fun, and I just made it all in Logic. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
It was fun.
Just wondering, what voice part were you in acapella?
Well, if you had to guess, Ronald, what would you say?
Well, see, like you kind of have a deep voice, but like I can totally see you being able to reach like high notes. So like I'm thinking like my safe guess would be a baritone. But also, was it a co-ed group or was it like all boys?
It was all men.
All men, right? Okay, then my guess would be baritone.
Yeah, I think you're right. I actually ended up taking voice lessons my senior year, and the guy or whatever said I was a bass baritone. I always wanted to like be with the bass group, and I think it's like because of my like perceptions of masculinity or whatever. But yeah, probably a baritone, somewhere between bass and baritone.
Gotcha.
Ron and I were both tenors.
Nice.
That was our thing.
We're in charge of the high voices,
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we were always jealous of the tenors, right? Because like you guys get all the great parts and whatever. It's like everybody wants to hear the belting tenor. Baritones are just like boring. We're just like regular dudes, just average dudes. So
it's less boring than bass, though. I feel like
bass always has a little. Like just really like repetitive parts. Bah, bah, bah. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. But I mean, at least with bass, it's like the most masculine sounding part. And also too, like, if you know anything about theory or whatever, like, so melody is the like, when we think of music, melody is, one of the most essential elements. And if you were to carve everything else away, melody would be the only thing that would remain. Or maybe rhythm, like if you really wanted to carve it down, but it's melody. And then if you just wanted to add one part, bass is a great one to add because bass kind of implies harmony. So I don't know, just a little shout out to basses, I guess. They're establishing the like what the harmony, the theoretical concept or whatever. So.
Sheila never taught us this.
Not at all.
Well, this is straight theory, straight theory. So.
Yeah. That's interesting though. But I wanted to get into teaching because after you came out of college, you took a teaching job. And that was like the first job you had coming out of college, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is there any like specific reason behind why you decided to enter teaching out of all the industries that you had available to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so I was like a camp counselor when I was growing up. I always like really liked working with young people for whatever reason. So it's always something that I knew I was interested in doing, and just like the idea of like working with, I guess, kids is something that always was like interesting to me. I always kind of wanted to do it. Like the idea of having an impact on somebody, like always appealed to me. So I think that was like a big reason. And then the reason that I did it in lieu of like some other opportunity is like I said, I like wasn't a very like serious student. And so I wasn't really honestly thinking seriously either about my future or anything when I was in school. Like, I think I just was trying to like have the best time I could and, like survive that whole like institution or whatever. And I didn't think that much about it. And I probably should have, because then when I was nearing graduation, I was like, shit, like, I got to get a job. Like, I don't know. So I feel like the teaching worked out because I was a camp counselor, and then I actually was a teaching intern for a couple summers too. Actually, one year was at NMH. No, both years were at NMH. So I'd already had like an internship with teaching over the summer. So it was like basically the one area where I feel like I was actually employable. And I knew that like I really liked it. So, I mean, that's kind of a boring answer, I guess, but yeah.
And was that at NMH, or was NMH like the second teaching job that you had?
Yeah, the second one. NMH was my second teaching job. Yeah, the first job was at Fay School, which is out near Boston. It's another private school, but it's like a pre-K through 9. But there's boarding, and you actually probably know some Fay kids who went to NMH.
Oh yeah. So that's like I think. Do you remember Marissa?
Yeah,
or
yeah. Marissa
Chris
Coe went to Fay.
Zhao.
Yep,
Um,
yep.
yeah,
Both of them
yeah.
were there after I
Actually, a
went
lot.
there. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. What year did you go to NMH or teach at NMH?
Yeah, I started in 2014. So I think like Marissa and who else did you say?
Chris Zhao.
Yeah, I think Chris and Marissa maybe came in right the year after I left.
Mm.
Jade,
I
I
see.
think Sama was also in that
Oh,
group.
Jade went to Faye too?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and
Did
actually I
not know that.
visited Faye the year after we left, and I met her when I was there, just like randomly. And then I ended up being her advisor later at NMH, which was kind of funny. And like we both remembered each other. I was like, "Oh yeah, I met you at Faye," and she was like, "Yeah." So
That's funny. That's funny. So at NMH, what was your first position there? Or what classes
math
did you
teacher.
teach?
Yeah,
You're
so
your math teacher. Okay.
Yeah, started as a math teacher. Let's see. My first semester, I taught geometry and precalculus. Yeah, and then I coached JV cross country and varsity baseball. I lived in Wallace.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I think Drake is having a little trouble with his audio right now. He said he can't hear us.
I don't know.
I'm just gonna pause this real quick.
Sure.
If that's okay. So this is where we lost Drake. Unfortunately, we weren't able to figure things out on his end. He kept on experiencing a lot of internet connectivity issues, so he won't be joining us for the remainder of this episode. However, I hope you're enjoying this episode so far, because Will and I will go on to discuss a lot of fascinating topics that you won't want to miss out on. So without further ado, let's get back to the conversation. All right, we're back on. Drake experienced some technical difficulties, but I forgot where we left off. Do you remember? I think we were talking about. I think we were talking about like Faye and how a lot of the students that you met at NMH went to Faye, and that was where you had your first teaching job. Oh, and
then you asked me what I
your
taught.
first, right, at NMH.
Yeah.
So you said geometry. And you said
Precalculus.
baseball coach, pre-calc.
Yes. Yeah. Baseball coach, cross country coach. Yeah.
Cross country coach. So when did you get into track? Because you were Drake's track coach. I know that.
I was Drake's track coach. I'm so sorry, Drake, about that. Yes. Yeah. So I got to do it my second year. Yeah. So the first year I did baseball. And then, yeah, there was a need on track. So switched over to that.
Did you play baseball growing up?
Yes. Yeah, I did. So that was like my first. Is Drake just frozen? I guess he's gone again now.
Yes, he's gone again.
Yeah, it was. So I played that. That was like kind of the first sport I played, I guess.
I see.
And yeah, I actually did it through high school until my junior year in high school, and then it was only then that I like tried running cross country and track.
I see.
Yeah.
And you like cross country and track more than baseball, or you still find baseball a little more exciting?
I don't know. I like them both. Like, it was like, I was going to be a senior in high school, and I think like baseball wasn't as fun as it used to be, kind of. And at that point, I just was like pitching, and I wasn't playing a ton. So I kind of was like, it's my last chance to just try a new sport, because then I'm going to go to college, and I probably won't be a college athlete. And yeah, so then I did cross country and like really ended up loving it. It's very, very different. And I was like, this is super cool. And I think actually probably in terms of like genetics, I probably was a little more predisposed to do that than baseball. So like I had a little success, and then I went to a D3 school that like wasn't super, competitive. And so it was like, I was talented enough in order to be on the team. So I just stuck with it. And then I was able to do that in school, in college.
Gotcha.
So yeah, super fun. I mean, I don't think I could choose one over the other. They're just really fun in different ways.
That's fair. A lot of people would say baseball is like super boring, especially at NMH, because our baseball team was never really that good in comparison to like other teams in our division. But
I hear that. Baseball hasn't aged well either. Like as our attention spans get shorter, baseball's not getting any more fast paced. But
exactly. I actually played baseball during my first 2 years at NMH, but decided to switch to volleyball, partly because I find playing baseball fun and watching it a little more boring. but I mainly made the switch just because you know how like the early part of the spring season it's still snowing out and it's still like super
Yeah,
cold.
it's
I'm
terrible.
like
Yeah,
let me avoid all this by doing a sport that is entirely indoors for the entire season. So tried out for volleyball and I got it. I got on the team and yep.
that's smart.
That
That
was
makes
my
sense.
logic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that totally makes sense. I mean, probably part of the reason I did baseball is simply because like it was the summer sport in the town I grew up in.
Uh-huh.
Probably as simple as that. Because it was like I would get out of school and then baseball would kind of pick up.
Yeah,
And so
fair
the weather
enough.
was always gorgeous, but like school baseball starting, yeah, I mean, like you said, it's just terrible. So
Right.
weather-wise,
Um I would love to have Drake on this, so do you mind if we just pause for the second time?
that's fine.
So sorry about this. I
Just
guess
me
it's
and
just
you.
me and you. Well, yeah, actually, what I wanted to get into after that is we want to ask you about your best parts and your worst parts regarding NMH, right? It could be about your experiences, it could be dealing with students. I don't know, whatever constitutes as best and worst during your time at NMH. We'd love to hear it.
Oh man, best and worst. Um, I mean, it's hard to pick out one best because there was a lot of really good times. Like I could think of a lot of like kind of exciting moments. Like, I think about like winning the cross country championship must have been, I don't even know what it was, 2018 maybe. I'd have to go back and look at the year. But that sounds right. Like fall 2018, that was incredibly
Mm-hmm.
exciting. So there are kind of moments like that where like you work really hard towards something and you try to help, like as an adult, you're trying to like help the young people like see like a version of themselves that's excellent, and then like you hope that they become that person or whatever. And so it's kind of one of those moments where it's like big success. So that was really fun. But no, I mean, honestly, the thing I love the most was just like, I think just being in the classroom. Like it just was really fun. When when you get a really good class and like, I feel like with math in particular, I mean, this doesn't apply to you because I think at least in my experience, you were like a pretty successful math student. But
Thank you. Thank you.
you talk to a lot of adults, and many of them didn't have a super positive experience with math. Not everybody, some people really enjoyed it, but a lot of people really hated it. And in fact, many adults will be like, they can tell you the person that ruined math, like, oh, Mr. Anderson or whoever it was. Like they've got some person, some teacher that just like totally sucked for whatever reason, and it just sucked for them. It was really bad. Um, And so like one thing that I loved about it is like my goal was to like not be that person. So that at least when somebody was saying why they hated math, I wasn't the one who ruined it for them.
Right. Right.
Um, and then yeah, just like I don't know, I feel like just try to make it like an environment where everybody feels like it's not um, like it's not this pressure cooker. It's not meant to make you feel anxious. It's not meant to like give you a grades that you can't get in your school that you want to go to or whatever. It's more like, just an opportunity for you to like make mistakes in a safe place and grow and kind of learn. I don't know. It's all like the lessons that were outside of math because the math itself didn't matter for most people. But I don't know. So just being in the classroom, honestly, was just like super fun every day.
Mm-hmm.
And like young people are exciting. Like adults are kind of boring. And they've kind of like given up, and like kids are not. They're just like, the dream is alive. And yeah, plus it's like hard being a teenager, so it's kind of fun to like maybe try to make it not be as hard, even though like
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm just eluding myself, maybe I wasn't really helping. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it just was really fun, honestly.
How about
But
on the
like,
flip side?
yeah, yeah, I mean, yeah. So the one thing that was hard basically was like, it's just like a boarding school thing. Like it takes a lot of
Mm-hmm.
time and like emotional. Plus with teaching, I think teaching too as a profession just takes actually a lot of like emotional investment. And that was fine. Like when I was kind of right out of school, I didn't have a ton of like responsibility, so it was fine. Like when school was in session, I was all in and I was able to make a lot of space available for that. But it just kind of got harder as I got older, like, and I started making a family of my own. Like, um, yeah, it's just hard. Like, I feel like I couldn't give all my time all the time anymore to NMH. And so yeah, like it just felt like it was too much. Like I felt like I didn't have enough of myself left to be like a husband and father that I wanted to be, you know? So I don't know. So it was just hard juggling those two things. And then the other thing too was like NMH, like it's a really cool place. And honestly, like I love working with the students. Like the students are super cool, super interesting, diverse and all that stuff. But also like it got really hard after a while knowing that like the vast majority of students, like 3/4 of the students are coming from like basically this like super top tier of like affluence and opportunity. And like living in a world where like inequality is like a super important problem right now, I just kind of, it was hard for me to be like, I love what I'm doing. It's so fun every day. But I also feel like this moral crisis of like, I'm this cog in the engine of like intergenerational inequality. And like, I'm the better opportunity I give these kids, the more I'm exacerbating this like really horrible moral problem, you know, that like society's dealing with. So honestly, that was like really hard for me. And I probably should have just not worried about it. But that, I don't know. So I was like grappling with that too. And it's like no criticism of any individual, or it's just like, that's the nature of the place. And I don't know. And it's not to say that there weren't kids who weren't in that situation at all, you know?
Right.
But that was hard. So
That's interesting because I never thought about like teaching at a boarding school is kind of like you said, exacerbating that inequality, that problem that society is dealing with. Because you know, at NMH we're constantly taught to be aware of these issues and taught to kind of dedicate our future careers to help solve these issues. But wow, yeah, no, that's definitely insightful to hear from like a teacher's perspective, how even though you really love your job and stuff, but what you're doing is actually you know, making the problem a little more severe than it is. It's fascinating. But I wanted to go back to what you mentioned about math and how, you know, like a lot of people feel like, you know, math is a subject that's boring and I hate math. And you didn't want to be the reason why they hated math, right? And actually, recently I read this book called Limitless Mind by Joe Bowler. Do you know about this book?
no,
She's a professor of, I think, education at Stanford's Graduate School of Education, I think. But basically, she is a huge fan of math. She studied math in the UK in undergrad and grad school. And what she's saying is like a lot of people go into math with the idea that, oh, like I'm not good at math, so I'm not going to do well in this class. And they kind of see math as a subject that's, you know, based on memorization, based on just remembering rules and laws and equations. But she believes that math is actually like a super interactive, super fun subject that's actually that could actually be taught and learned from a creative point of view. So I wanted to ask you, like, do you empathize with her position from your experience teaching math, and also you're a math lover yourself too? Because reading that, I like math too growing up, so I never really went into a math class saying like, oh, like math, like I don't like it. But I do like hear a lot of you know, people around me, even my siblings, who weren't really good at math, or they claim that they weren't good at math, and I could see the impact that this kind of mindset has on them, going into math class, or, you know, more broadly, any situation that they face in life. Like if they go into that situation saying, oh, like I'm not going to be good at it. It turns out that like Limitless Mind is like what the book is about is like she's bringing out research saying how, actually with neuroplasticity, like people actually can learn anything at any age, if you're just willing to persist and actually embrace failure, yada yada, all that type of thing. So yeah, like I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. I know I kind of just threw a lot of things at you, but what are your thoughts on that?
You did. I'm going to pick up kind of two threads on what you just said. Well, maybe three threads. The first thread is please send me a copy of Limitless Mind. Second
Sure.
thread is, yeah, I mean, at least as you've described it, exactly what you just said. I mean, I know I'm not an education researcher, so I don't have the research, to back it up. I haven't done the meta study or whatever, but yes, I 100% agree. That really resonates with me. I mean, it kind of comes back to like our introduction, right? I'm not sure if you were recording yet, right? But it's where we were kind of talking about like math and music and how one maybe is creative music and one maybe not so much math.
Mm-hmm.
So they seem to kind of be maybe, in opposition to one another. But yeah, I mean, in the same way that I did see music as kind of systematized too, but math to me was always very creative. And in fact, like I was not the type of student who, if you were to give me, hey, define, X, Y, Z, that has to do with whatever, theorems or whatever. Like I was not a rote memorization, regurgitation math student at all. And for me, like math, it was a very creative subject, and it was all about problem solving. And it was just like a framework of problem solving. Like math is a set of rules, and problem solving was the thing that I enjoyed the most about it. And so I thought it was very creative, like because many problems too, like particularly as you study more and more math, there's multiple ways to like solve it or to like arrive at a solution. And so I just see it as very creative. And also too, I think the second thread is what you said about like neuroplasticity. And I think it's true. I think it's probably how the brain works. And again, I say that not as a neuroscientist, but like it's also, I think, rings true with my experience as a teacher, and also rings true with like my philosophy as a teacher. Like, I think many people have this conception in their mind that math is a subject where, like you're either good at it or you aren't. That's a very fixed mindset perspective. There's another book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. Have you heard about this book?
Oh, yes. Actually, Carol Dweck is kind of the mentor of Joe Bowler, which is the author of Limitless Mind.
Totally makes sense, because a lot of what you were saying is like Dweckian. I'm not sure if that's a word.
Yeah, it is. Well, I guess
yes.
so, but
yeah. And so actually that was a book that I read probably in like 2011, maybe. So very early on in my teaching career. And it was a life-changing book for me, having read it, because I realized that I was a fixed mindset individual, right? So the notion of the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset is the fixed mindset is when you believe that like intelligence is something that's fixed. So there's smart people, there's dumb people or whatever. And then the growth mindset is you believe in neuroplasticity and you believe the brain is like a muscle. So it can be grown. Intelligence is not immutable, right? And as a result, if you think about the behaviors that are associated with those two mindsets, so if you have a fixed mindset, you're like, Ron, you're either dumb or smart. So if I ask a question of the class, you are unlikely to want to answer, because if you're wrong, then you've demonstrated that you're dumb. Exactly. If you're right, you have the upside of like demonstrating that you're smart, But the idea is that if you're fixed mindset, it discourages risk taking. And you mentioned risk taking in your like description of Limitless Mind. And that's what it's all about. When you realize intelligence is immutable, then you realize the only way to learn is to take risks. It's like the scientific method. That's what science is all about. It's like, let's test this hypothesis. Let's take a risk. And, and failure is a means of learning. And if you want to be the best at something, you've got to fail a million times, So that was that other part of the thread, is like, totally agree with that. And it's just, for some reason, it's so hard for people to want to fail with math. They perceive that there's like, you got to go through the steps and it's right or it's wrong. And it's like, no, it's about process. It's about problem solving. And like, if the solution's so important in a real context, like we would check our work, or like you'd be working on a team. And so whatever, like, but for some people, for some reason people miss that. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's like, grumpy old white guys who ruin math. I don't know if it's like, I don't know. But anyway, that was my long-winded answer to your long-winded question, but totally
for sure. Yeah, because you mentioned that when you read The Mindset by Carol Dweck, you kind of reflected upon your own experiences, and you're like, wow, like I actually lived most of my life with a fixed mindset, and that maybe like hindered a lot of growth that you were totally capable of experiencing. Because when I read Limitless Mind, that was like the same realization that I had. I reflected on a lot of moments that I had at NMH. Like going into NMH, I always considered myself as like a more logical, like math, like pragmatic person. And so going into like science and math courses, I was so confident. I'm like, like I might not have to study all that much, but still come out with an A. But when I go into like, Hume or history, subjects that I'm a little, or that I deem myself a little weaker, and I actually do worse in those subjects because I feel like going into those classes, I'm like, yeah, I'm just not good at history. Like the best I could do is like a B plus. I went into those classes with that mindset, and it definitely held me back a lot. And like you said, reading Limitless Mind, it definitely opened up a lot for myself, which is like it's very insightful to learn, and I think it helps. That mindset can be applied in almost every situation in life. I feel like, and it's a good mindset to go into anything with.
100%.
Especially, right?
Yeah. And the beauty of it too is it's like when you really think about it, it's not profound at all. It's obvious. It's totally obvious that like, if you want to get good at something, you've got to work really hard. You've got to not pout when you make mistakes, or you got to pick yourself up. You've got to keep going. And that like improvement is totally natural if you practice. Like that's basically the idea. It's not a crazy, like profound idea at all. And then the one other thing that I would add to is like, and this kind of gets to my math teaching philosophy too, is like the reality is your brain. I don't also mean to say that there isn't like a biological component, and that like there aren't people who are predisposed towards certain types of thinking, or like certain, like obviously there are geniuses, right? And there are people who maybe are a little bit less bright naturally. But the idea is you can still change your brain a lot through work. And also I would say too, it's like the brain is developmental. So Homo sapiens, like we had this huge childhood for some reason where our brain is changing so much. And so when I would teach these kids at NMH, right, I would get you when you were like, how old were you? 16 in my class or something? 15,
Yeah, I think I was 16, yeah.
16, right? So like your brain, and now you're what, 19?
I'm turning 19 in a month. Yeah.
Right. And so your brain at 19 is different than it was at 16. And when you're 25, your brain will also be different just by virtue of like, genetics or evolution, or whatever. Like your brain is continuing to change as you develop.
Right.
And so my goal too was like, one of the reasons I didn't want to ruin math is because I wanted to bridge the gap where like, all right, you're 16 in my class. If I can not ruin math for you and you can hang on just a little bit longer, you'll see it again. It'll still be in your life when you're 20. You haven't gotten scared away yet. And your brain has changed enough that the game is different. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, maybe I want to be a chemist. Maybe I want to do X, Y, Z. That if I'd given up on math on 16 when my brain wasn't fully developed, it never would have happened. So that was, I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense, but that notion of not scaring them off before their brain's going to catch up. And then they'll actually be able to do things that seemed difficult or think about it in a different way,
That definitely makes sense. And I mean, like you said, man, like mindset is really, it's crazy how, like you said, these what's said in the book, Limitless Mind and Mindset, it's so obvious. It's like growing up, people always say like, learn through, like, don't be afraid to fail. Like we know it. We know that we shouldn't be afraid of failing. And yet here we are in classrooms, afraid to ask questions, afraid to yell out the wrong answer. It's ironic to see that. But yeah, so actually I wanted to ask you about, you briefly mentioned that these are the problems that you see, kids deal with, in school, in classrooms, they're kind of risk averse, in some sense. So do you think that, the education system has something to do with this? And if so, like, what does it have to do with this kind of phenomenon of kids afraid to take risk and just, going into things with a fixed mindset? Is that like a culture thing, or what do you think it is?
Yeah, man, I don't know. I think it's probably a lot of things. But like, I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
I think we can like, we could hypothesize in a way that's kind of reasonable. Like, I don't know, does it have to do with like, we have classrooms where you're with a dozen people, 24 people or whatever, it's kind of humiliating to be wrong. So is that it? Is it that like the way that we structure like learning is you eventually demonstrate it through an assessment of some kind, which is emphasizing like a correctness, like as if it's a thing, in a math context, it's, a number there's a right one, there's a wrong one. In an English context, it's like correct grammar versus incorrect, maybe, or like an analysis that's compelling versus not. It's like there's this idea of correctness and you're trying to like figure out what it is. So does it make us like allergic to being wrong? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know how much it's cultural. Like maybe it's different in other places. Like I think Carol Dweck would maybe say, I think she maybe told some anecdote about some like Japanese school or something. She told some story and she was trying to paint some contrast to like Western culture, whatever that means, and this like particular Japanese school that she was looking at. I think it was in her book. And I don't know if there's any like truth to that. I think it's hard to paint in broad strokes. But basically she told the story that she told, I think it was in this book, and you can just fact check me and I might just be wrong apparently, but I heard this somewhere, right? The anecdote that she told was like this kid, they were drawing cubes one day, I think in the class, and they were young kids. And, one kid was just like not drawing the cube right. It's hard to do, whatever. And the teacher had the kid who was doing it wrong go and do it on the board in front of everybody. And everybody watched as this kid just like failed and failed and failed and failed. And then eventually the kid got the cube right. Then the teacher had the kid go sit down. And so I think Dweck's point was like, and again, this is probably like totally not, I don't know if this is real, but like, I think her point was like, maybe there's something culturally there. It's like the teacher's emphasizing like, she's not picking the kid to put the right answer on the board. She's picking the kid who's not doing the cube right, because it's saying it's not about the cube. It's about the process that the kid went through and demonstrating that. It's like sending a signal that like the expectation is that you're going to do the cube right, but here's the process. If that makes sense. And I don't know if that's like a Japanese culture thing. I don't think it's an American culture thing.
For sure. I think
I don't know.
I actually read like a similar, not like a similar anecdote, but in Limitless Mind, Joe Bowler, she talked about this school in China, again, in like the Asian region, and how they emphasize collaboration in math class in comparison to, I guess, the American culture or the Western culture, where it's like you go into a class and you try to succeed on your own. And her anecdote is like, she went to this school in China and she noticed that the teacher, when approaching a problem, she spends like half the class on one problem, trying to get different groups of students work on it, trying to get different students to put up different solutions for that problem. And she said in that school, the teacher never makes the students do more than like 3 problems in a math class versus, in comparison to like the Western culture, where you go into class and the homework is like homework, or like, class work is like you have to do like 15 problems of like the same concept. And if you get all that right, you get 100, something like that. And she, through that anecdote, she emphasized collaboration and how, working with people, kind of sharing your thought process with people, that actually helps learning a lot. And reading that actually, it reminded me of in your class when you put us into, pods. I think you used, that's what you call them? Pods, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yep. And you kept on having us work on, problems in groups of 3 to 4. And, and actually that, like, that was, and that reminded me of last year when I graduated. We briefly talked on Instagram and you were saying like, that's, I need somebody who knows how to communicate, yada yada, and that's why I put you jabronis in pods in your class. So like the point is, I didn't realize that. I don't know if it was intentional on your part or not, but that definitely helped my performance in your class, because in your class that was the best grade that I gotten in all the math classes that I've taken in my entire life. And reading that
was a hard
book,
class too.
yes, and it was really surprising because I was, in comparison to like Drake and Shamik, a lot of my friends, they're like one math class ahead of me. So like junior or sophomore year, I had taken honors algebra 2 while they were taking pre-calc. And then junior year was when I doubled up. I took pre-calc first semester, then BC the second semester. And so going into junior year, knowing that I'm going to take honors pre-calc specifically, they were
which
warning
might be the
me
hardest math class at NMH, by the way.
that's what they're saying. They're like, oh man, like you're get ready for it. Like the workload's crazy. The concepts are hard to grasp.
Yeah,
and
you must have been ready for it.
Yeah,
I think you get an A plus in that class. You got an A.
I got an A plus, which is like super surprising. And so, and which was like, and so when I told them, they're like, what? But like when I'm reading Limitless Mind and it talks about collaboration, and it really resonated with me, especially in that class, and how powerful collaboration is. And so like, yeah, like was that intentional on your part, like putting us into pods so that we could work together? Is that like maybe because of some you read in Dweck's book? I don't know. Like what was your intention behind that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it was 100% intentional. In fact, like if I were to say like, if you were like, hey, you've got to make the shortest list possible of like your like philosophies about like how to manage your class or whatever. I think the pods, it might be number 1, number 2, I don't know, like top of the list. And yeah, I mean, I think it's the reasons that you're talking about. It's like, I mean, I should caveat too and say like, I don't think it's the best environment for 100% of kids. I don't, unfortunately. Like, I don't think you can just create a classroom that's perfect for every kid. I mean, maybe you can. Maybe I'm just not being creative enough, right? But I knew, like, I would see kids who don't succeed in the pod environment, and like that always did bring me down because I knew, like, oh man, they'd just be better off if I like broke the desks out and maybe did some little bit more individual work, for whatever reason. So, I mean, I'll caveat with that. It's not like it's some magic formula that like, learning goes through the roof, But yes, I definitely was like, it was something that I was like really a big fan of, and I really wanted as much conversation to be having as possible. And like my thinking about it was like, one, kind of like there's multiple layers. So one is like, if let's say I explained something and maybe you're picking up the concept, or like maybe you were paying attention because you actually ate breakfast, or like whatever. Then you pick it up, you're going to then explain it maybe to your group. You'll be more of the explainer in that role. The simple act of having to explain is like really going to reinforce your understanding in a way that it wouldn't if you were just like taking notes or maybe just doing a problem set or whatever. So it's benefiting you, the explainer. Also, the other folks who just heard it from me, it's like I'm some old dude. My vocabulary is a little bit different. I grew up in a different place. There's, it's like one communicator, and I'm not going to be the best communicator for every person. So then they're going to hear it from you, and like that might reinforce it. They might understand the way you're describing it better because you're like maybe sharing their experience more. So I thought it might also be good for the other group mates who are hearing it from you, and they've heard it from me. They're getting multiple sources for the same information. And you're going to like understand better what they're doing wrong than maybe I am, because my head is like so far, whatever, in like my own zone. I'm not learning it, like you are. And so I thought that was like something there. Then also to like social skills are obviously like probably the most important skill because we're a social species. And so I didn't want to like raise a bunch of sociopaths. So that was important too. Just like literally just having conversations, and then like, I feel like there was one other thing that I was going to say, but maybe I'm losing my train of thought. Oh yeah. And also too, it's just like practical. Like if it's the case that like in China, all these kids are learning math and they're super collaborative and talking, and in the US, they're all in rows, which I mean, I'm not saying that both those things are true, but China's going to be like the American hegemony is done in 20 years. Like if that's what's going on, because the reality is too, like it's how the economy works now. It's like interacting with other humans and explaining things. And there's also like an enormous benefit that you can provide to an employer or your business idea or whatever if you're able to communicate pretty technical things to an audience that maybe isn't super familiar with it. So that's a very important skill. And also it's just like enormously lucrative to be able to do that as well. So it's like practical for those reasons too. So anyway, I feel like that was also a long-winded answer, but yes, that was definitely super intentional. I know a lot of teachers did it, which I think was pretty cool. It's probably where I got the idea.
Oh, really? Like putting students into pods?
Yeah, it was like the norm, I think.
Oh, okay. Actually, yeah, I'm thinking about like math classes. I think you were actually the only teacher that did that. But I do remember in my out of the classes, the math classes that I had taken at NMH. But I'm thinking really about physics. When I took AP Physics with Mrs. Collins, she put us into groups of 3 to 4 people. Actually, she didn't put us into like specific groups, but she put the desk into like into pods of 3 to 4, and she just had us sit in, so we had no choice but to sit in that formation, and so we had to work with each other, and I could definitely see how that helps with some subject like physics too, because physics is another subject where students belabor and they feel like, like so boring, a lot of math, so many rules I have to remember. So yeah, no, I definitely feel like I know. But yeah, I mean, other than your class, I don't think I've been put into pods in other math classes at NMH, but it was definitely
maybe I was overstating that then. I mean, a couple other things I would say too. I mean, I could go on and on about this. I'm a huge fan of pods.
No, go ahead.
Well, the other thing that I like about it is like, and I think there's two sides of the coin here. So I don't think it's all good, and I'm not like an evangelist, or I want to be open to the idea that like this isn't just like a perfect idea. But like another thing that I liked is like, as like human beings, right, is we have like a fundamental need to like feel like we belong. We've got like group, we've got a whatever. And what I love about the pod thing is like, it's a way of like shrinking the class a little bit. So like you've got your pod of like, I think in your class it was only pods of, who was in your pod? It was you.
It was me, Do-hoon.
You had 4 actually, right?
I had 4. I think it was me, Do-hoon, Jeb or Scott, and then it was
was Jeb in your pod?
He was for a little bit, but also Scott was in my pod for a little bit too, I feel like. But and then there was one last one. I forgot her name. Celeste.
Yes,
Celeste and Do-hoon. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. Yes. Yeah. So my other thinking too was like you would create like a kind of like a little community in your pod, and so then also too, whenever you come into math, it's like when you're walking into the classroom, I want you to feel like you're walking home. I want you to feel like you're walking into a very comfortable space where you belong. And you're comfortable, everybody's comfortable with you, you know your identity, you're just in a good place. You're not like trying to hide something in math class, which I'm not saying that people weren't doing that, because I know teenagers were walking in my room every day not feeling like it was their home, right? I get that. But I was trying to go in that direction. And so I feel like the pod kind of helped, particularly kids who like maybe you don't want to be in a group of 16 people or whatever. Like you could have your little pod, you could get to know everybody really well. And that's why I didn't like to assign seating, and I also didn't like to mix it up. Because I just wanted everyone to be comfortable. The downside is that you can get stuck in a pod that just isn't good.
Right.
And then you're also trapped by the same.
You never mixed us up?
Maybe sometimes. I would occasionally do it. I feel like I had to, but not really. I just would let it happen.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, there's pros and cons.
Right.
So whatever. And then also I like the idea of team too. So like, I feel like you would take responsibility. Like as somebody who was getting Precalculus pretty well, maybe Scott, maybe wasn't getting as fast that day or whatever. Like I liked the idea of like, you're all owning. The goal is like, you get to know Scott really well. You care about him. You don't want him to fail the class. Right. And so you are taking a little bit of ownership of like, hey, I got to help this guy out. I'm going to try to answer his questions. You know, it's good for you. And also like, you just feel like you have a responsibility to community. Like at our best, we're very community oriented, moral individuals. When our communities are small, we really care about our like group. When you zoom out, we're like racist. We go to war, like we do all these horrible, horrible things. But when you zoom in, we're like very, very thoughtful, like community oriented people. So I was trying to like kind of bring out the best, if that makes sense too, of like, like taking that social responsibility, that like team role of like success looks like everybody's going to understand this. If that makes sense.
No, for sure. I mean, now that I'm in college for 1 year now, I noticed that, well, also I went to college during this super unusual, unprecedented year. So I honestly still have no idea like what the normal college experience is like. But I'd imagine, because the campus is much bigger, the student population is much bigger. It's much more difficult to kind of exercise that type of teaching format in the classroom. And so, like, how you being able, having gone through college already, like, what do you think college students can do to kind of take advantage of like the power of collaboration and like teaching each other, because like that's hard to do in a classroom, especially like big lectures with like 100 people, maybe even at smaller schools like 50 plus people. It's tough to do that in classrooms. So yeah, what do you think what are some tips? I guess I'm kind of asking for tips for myself here and for whoever's listening, in terms of how to take advantage of these ideas in college, in the college environment.
Yeah, I don't know. My first reaction is I think you're asking the wrong guy.
Oh, really?
To be honest, yeah, I think so. But I mean, I think I guess. But what I would say is like, like you go to the big lecture hall, you're looking around the room and you're finding somebody who's going to be your study buddy. And if you're taking a class alone and you're not identifying somebody to work with, you're just less likely to be successful, I think. I think it's kind of as simple as that. So yeah, it's trying to find like, is your friend or somebody you kind of know registered for the class too? Can you, link up with them and like maybe start a study group? If it's like a humanities class and you're studying for the final, maybe if there's 9 topics, maybe you each research 2, and you have a study group with 4, I mean, whatever. Like, I think it's that kind of thing. It's figuring out how to actually create a study group. And again, not sense. Profound, but I think that's kind of the,
I mean, sometimes the simple answer will do the job.
I mean, could you even do that this year? Like, did you even have study groups? Was that a thing? Or what did school even look like for you?
I mean, so we had a hybrid format. So luckily I go to Babson, which is a school of like 2,300 undergraduate students. So, and in addition to the already small school population, about half of those students weren't on campus, at least in the first semester. So there was only like about 1,100 students on campus, and then maybe like 200-300 freshmen. So it was really like NMH. It felt so much like NMH. Even the buildings looked like NMH. So like, in class, we did a hybrid format. So on some days, I'd go to class, and on some days I'd do Zoom. And so, yeah, it's already tough to meet people in classrooms, because you don't get to interact with them in the classroom. You're separated like a few seats away, social distancing. And then outside the classroom, like if you don't interact in the classroom, it's kind of out the way to kind of introduce yourself to somebody. Like, obviously people do that, but people tend to be a little more hesitant or reluctant to do that outside the classroom, when it's like, I guess, quote unquote, not natural. So right. There's fewer study groups. You see, like when I walked into the library, you see people working together in like rooms and groups, but most of those people are like sophomores, upperclassmen, because they already have their kind of support circle, right? But me being a freshman, not knowing anybody there, there was only one person from NMH, Kohaku. I don't know if you know him, but he was the only other person from NMH that went to Babson with me in my year. So other than
him,
you
guys in the same dorm or anything?
We were actually. He lived directly below me. So we never like hung out, but like, I'd see him like around campus, and I'd say hi to him. We check in on each other. The NMH bond is and will forever be there. But
That's funny. Was he in your class? I think he actually might have been in your Precalculus class, right? Was he in that same class, or was he in a different one? Because I also talked a lot.
wait,
I think he was. I think he was in that class.
he might have been in that class too.
I think he was.
Actually,
He was. Yeah, you were the pod. Like that's where the
close to the
board was in that
door.
room. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And I think
yeah.
he was the one that was right next to the glow screen, the like whiteboard or whatever,
Actually,
the
yes.
projector.
Actually, yeah. Oh, wow. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, I think he was
Yeah,
actually in our class too.
I think he was too. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
I didn't mean
but
to interrupt you. Sorry.
no, you're good. Yeah. So like, as a freshman who doesn't or who didn't really know anybody, it's tough to find that support circle, especially when people take different classes. Yes, like Babson is a business school, so most of us take similar classes. But if you have a different professor, like the syllabus is a little different, the test format is a little different. So in the end, it would be the most beneficial and most effective. I feel like if I had studied with people in my class, but it's tough to even introduce myself to somebody in my class. So that was tough at first, but in the end, after I got to know a little bit of, I became friends with a few upperclassmen through like clubs, and I joined a business fraternity, and so I found kind of my own circle, my social circle, and the tips that they gave me is like, I mean, Babson is a small school, so you just gotta kind of swallow your pride or whatever. Just introduce yourself to as many people as you can, and that's how you network, really, especially in the business world too. Like, networking is super important. So they're saying like it's a very useful skill to develop, starting now. And so that's what I started doing in the second semester, and very quickly I was able to kind of find my group of people, and study with them. And so yeah, that was my experience in the first year. But I think this coming year, with people being vaccinated and things are starting to return to normal, it would be much easier for incoming students to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Plus, with like the weekend scene and stuff, it just might be a little easier to get to know more people.
exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, on the weekends, campus was really dead. Like, people, because we're not allowed to gather like outside, like more than a group of like 6 people or something. I forgot what the number was, but there was a lot of restrictions, so people didn't really hang out outside. People just
Mhm.
went off campus. We have actually at Babson we have Fridays off, so we kind of have a 3-day weekend every week.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, we
How
have
is it a
classes only.
school? What? That's
Yeah, we only
crazy.
we have classes only from Mondays to Thursdays. I mean, some classes they happen on Fridays, but like very few of them, and they're like weird, non like business classes. I don't know, but most classes are between Monday and Thursday. So we have a 3-day weekend every week. So a lot of people would take advantage of that. Go to the city, go to New York, go home. So
Mhm.
yeah, on the weekends, it's like the long weekends on the NMH campus. Super
Mhm.
quiet. Nobody's there. Nobody's really interacting with each other. So that was what the first year was like.
That's just terrible, man. I'm sorry to hear that. It's like
No,
honestly,
it's
yeah. I mean, when I think about like all the people who've been like, this doesn't have to do with what the podcast's about or whatever, but
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think about all the people that have been like really like hurt by the pandemic, and like obviously the people who died and like their loved ones. Yes, terrible, terrible.
yeah,
But like honestly, your generation, like it's also really sad, like that you've borne the brunt of this thing that like you're not really at risk, as a generation, and like you just had to kind of miss out on this like really, really wonderful time in your life, and it's so good. It's going to come back, which is so awesome. Uh,
yeah.
but
I'm
like,
definitely looking
yeah, no,
forward to that.
yeah,
And honestly, I'm
yeah.
I'm a little more bummed about not being able to finish out my NMH, my time at NMH the way I envisioned myself finishing it out. Just in terms of missing like Shat, graduation. My parents have, my mom's been on campus when I visited prior to freshman year, but my dad has never been on campus. I wanted him to be there and see me walk across the stage, but I wasn't able to make that happen because of COVID. I was actually more bummed about that than I guess a slightly flawed freshman college experience, because I spent 4 years at NMH, so definitely have some emotional attachment to that place. But I'm
I
glad
hear
that
you.
I'm still in Massachusetts, so I get to visit hopefully sometime this year, see some of my past teachers and stuff. But anyway, I guess we're kind of getting to the end of the podcast. I don't want to hold too much of your night, but just a few last questions. I like to end my podcast with two things. One is, what is a motto that you live by? I know there may be many, but one that I would say is the most has had the most profound impact on your life so far. And the second is, I would love to hear some book recommendations. I know we briefly talked about Carol Dweck and Joe Bowler, but in addition to that, to those books, if you have any book recommendations, we would love to hear it.
Oh man, these are good questions. I wish you gave me these beforehand. So I didn't have to jump off the cuff. Geez, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to give you some pretty bad answers. I'm sorry.
It's all right. Take your time.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if this is a motto, but it's like a lifestyle thing. Have you ever heard of the 40% rule? I think that's what it's called. It's like a Marines thing.
No. Can you speak on it a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I think any of your Marines, listeners or whatever, maybe can fact check me on this, but I think it comes from the Marines. And the idea is probably not unique to them or whatever, but it's the notion that when you think that you've reached your limit of endurance, and your ability to persevere or whatever, when you have you're at capacity, that means that you're actually 40% of the way to your true limit. So it's the notion that actually, we're 2.5 times as capable as we really think we are. If you could just kind of suffer through and keep putting one foot in front of the other. So I don't know. It took me a long time to learn that lesson. I don't know if that's a motto.
Definitely is.
But yeah. So yeah, I guess that's the motto. And then the book, I mean, a good book. I don't know. There was a cool one I read. Have you heard of The Blind Watchmaker?
No, what is it?
It's kind of an older book. I think it's maybe written in the 70s. Do you know who Richard Dawkins is?
No.
He's Richard Dawkins is an evolutionary biologist or something like that. He's a scientist. Oh, and he's also an asshole. But anyway, he
Good to know.
It was yeah. Whenever he was, I mean, he's still alive, I think, but his career maybe was in the 70s or 80s or whatever. There was a big debate that was happening about creationism versus evolutionary biology versus what's that other one? Intelligent design.
Mm-hmm.
And so The Blind Watchmaker, he basically just Dawkins, it's a rebuttal to creationism and intelligent design. And again, it's annoying that he's rebutting that because he's just kind of being an asshole. But in the book, he tells all these really cool stories about just certain biological structures that exist in nature. And it's the most mind-blowing story. And this is a long time ago, so we've probably learned so much more. But for example, he was describing how bats see, using their sonar or whatever. And the picture that he was painting, I don't know, there's all these stories that he tells about these biological structures that I think are just so incredibly fascinating. So it has nothing to do with your podcast. But it's a really cool book. It's one you can pick up and put down because if you don't really care about the debate that he's trying to have with himself or whatever, you can just read it because every chapter tells a different story about a certain biological structure. So I don't know. It's really cool. You can just pick it up. I probably have not even finished it. I'll go back and read it.
Oh, really?
There, but it's a really cool book. Yeah. I often don't finish books, which is annoying.
I see. Yeah. I just looked it up right now. It's written in published in 1986. So it
86.
has some 1986. So
Newer than
it,
I thought it was.
it has some age on him.
Yeah.
Well, that is the end of this podcast, I guess. Really appreciate you coming on. It's really good seeing you and talking to you, obviously. Well, definitely, I will send you a copy of Limitless Mind. Send me your address. I'll send it over there.
I appreciate that. Wow.
Yeah, of course. And I wish you the best moving forward. I'll definitely stay in touch and would love to hear if you have any updates, life, anything, book recommendations.
Yeah, cool.
I'd love to hear more about that too.
Yeah, cool. Well, I really appreciate that. Have you actually read Mindset? That's my last question for you.
No, I haven't. It's just I know because in the introduction of Limitless Mind, Joe Bowler talked a lot about Carol Dweck and how in her book Mindset, it talks about like fixed and growth mindset and how in her book, she's just trying to dive a little deeper into like how to learn rather than like mindset. She dives a little deeper into like how to learn, like through collaboration, through embracing failure, yada yada yada. So it's like similar ideas, but just presented in a different way. So cool. I know about it. Yeah, actually, I have the book right here. It's right here, Limitless Mind.
Cool. Joe Bowler, is she paying for this podcast?
She is not. I wish. Hopefully one day, man. But cool. Actually, the quote on the quote. I don't know if you can see it, but the quote on the cover page, it's a quote by Carol Dweck, author of Mindset. It says, "Bowler is one of those rare and remarkable educators who not only know the secret of great teaching, but also know how to give that gift to others."
That's so cool.
So yeah, it's definitely a cool book to read. But again,
cool.
Appreciate you hopping on this podcast.
I know you're trying to end the pod. I'm just going to say one more thing. I do actually have a book recommendation that's relevant now that I'm thinking about it.
Spit it out.
Yeah,
Spit it out.
I don't remember the authors, but it's called Make It Stick. Make It Stick.
Oh, actually, I think I've heard of that book. Yeah,
that one's way more relevant. It's about like kind of how the brain works and like basically how to like learn more effectively. It's a cool book and it's an easy read and it's all super practical. And you basically just read the introduction. It's got like 15 things or something like that. But it's all like super practical stuff for how to learn fast. So anyway, I'll stop rambling.
You're all good, man.
Appreciate you having me on. It was good to connect.
Yeah,
give Drake my best. And we'll exchange addresses.
Yep, for sure. All right, you enjoy the rest of your night, Will.
All right, see you, Ronald. Have a great day. See ya.
Yep, you too.